All right, so this is another video tutorial on SKC, the add-on that I made. Um, this one is specific for the guild leader and all the extra controls and configuration options that the guild leader has. There's a whole bunch of stuff that only the guild leader can change, and yeah, this is basically how you set up the add-on to do what you want. Um, so a bunch of these options are available just straight up from the GUI. So we'll go over those first. Specifically, you can click on somebody. You'll see all these buttons are illuminated now. Normal players don't have these, um, with the exception of these buttons. The master looter has the ability to use only during a raid. They use them to make changes to the SK list if there's mistakes or errors or whatever. Um, So yeah, we'll go over those real quick. Basically, for the guild leader, these are used as like punishments, right? Like if someone has missed too many raids, you can single SK them, which drops them down one position. You could full SK someone, drops them down to the bottom. You can set SK, you select someone, set SK, tells you to click somewhere, click one of these numbers, and you can put them to that position if you need to do that for whatever reason. You'll note that this is saying pushing, right? Anytime the guild leader makes changes here, that data is automatically pushed to the rest of the guild, so everyone has constant, updated lists and data. Um, yeah, so that's the SK manipulations. You can do that to tier SK or main SK either way. For this stuff, all these edit buttons have illuminated. These are the ways that you control like the guild data and all the attributes for each player. So this stuff, is automatically populated when you load the add-on, but you're going to want to customize it for your guild, of course. Um, Real quick, you can edit them. You just select a person and select these buttons, and you can select that person from either list. Everyone has a card in both lists. It doesn't matter. Making changes here will make them in both sides. It's the guild data is different from the list data. So yeah, you only have to edit it once in one place. But anyway, so you can change the spec, right? So you can edit this one. You'll know that if you watch the loot prio video, that spec plays a role in how priority is established. So an item has a loot prio associated with a spec or class, and this is how that player's this player's spec is determined. So everyone can see this too, see these values. So this is a way to kind of keep track of who's what everyone's raid spec is. It can only be one value here, and this is how their priority is established. So this is an important one. So yeah, you can edit and select whatever their spec is. Again, automatically updates. You'll see the raid role automatically updates here. That raid role is just used for filtering for the sake of convenience for people. So yeah, you can make change those on different characters, right? Shadows, DPS. Guild role is either none, disenchanter, or banker. You'll know from the loot prio video also that this is used when everyone passes on an item. If it's configured to be disenchanted, then the item will go to a disenchanter. If not, the item would go to a banker. And if there are no characters with those roles assigned, then the item just goes to the master looter. So this is a good way maybe to maybe make sure that the guild leader gets all the bank stuff or any of the BOEs that you might have in the loot prio, and maybe everything else you could tag as a disenchant and send that to whoever your guild disenchanter is. You can update the status, which is main or alt. Again, this is used in loot prio for prioritization stuff. Also helpful for people to keep track and for filtering of the list. People don't necessarily want to see all the alts on the list all the time, so nice to filter that out. But again, important for the actual loot prio. It changes how the loot is distributed. Activity is really just a convenience for the guild leader to keep track of people's activity levels. Maybe note that someone hasn't been on in a long time. Maybe that you can remove them from the guild or SK them or something. You can manually make people inactive. It sets people, like you'll note the last raid. This is determined basically by the last time that player
was added to a live list by the tool. Um, this was automatically set to the activity threshold, which is something you can control. Talk about that in a second. But you can manually edit their status here, and then again, you can use that to filter. Like if we make this person inactive, we can make them not show up in the list or whatever. And when someone has been hasn't been active for this threshold, then it'll automatically trigger them as an active. So again, just a way to keep track. Okay, so those are all the new GUI buttons the guild leader has. But in addition, there are a bunch of new help commands that the guild leader has access to. Right, this is for all the regular stuff, and then here's what guild leader can do. So what I just mentioned, the activity threshold, right? We can change that to whatever number of days we want to. Yeah, pretty simple. We'll go over these init ones later. They're a little more complicated. These ones are pretty straightforward. AI is active instance, and LO is loot officer. So active instance or active raids is the list of instances which SKC is going to be used in. If your guild forms a raid and tries to go to one of those raid that's not in the active instance list, then SKC just won't enable, and they won't be able to make edits to the SK list, and none of that will happen. So the way you manage it, well, so first of all, anyone can see it by just doing this. You can see these are all the instances for which this is enabled. This is just the default. Let's say you don't want to use SKC active instance. You don't want to use it for ZG, so you can do that command, and boom, it removes ZG from the lists. You could start fresh and clear it all, and then add. Maybe you just want to do BWL. Oops. Right. So you get how that works. Likewise for loot officer, same thing. Everyone can see who all the loot officers are. These are people that, in order for this to be active, the player who is master looter in the raid needs to be one of these loot officers. Yeah, right now you can see there's two, and those are the two who are loot officers. You can add people to this list. Maybe we want Kagome to be one. Nope. Right. So we can add people to the list. Cool. So now let's talk about initialization. So these are kind of two ways to shortcuts to starting your data. Hopefully you've watched the loot prio video, which describes how you construct a loot prio doc, but I'll assume that you have it at this point. And we'll just look at loop prio, right? So this was something we talked about in the last video, another video. So you could export this as a CSV. Open that up, copy it, and take it over to your WoW. And you can do SKC loop prio init, and just paste this directly in here. Again, watch the video to see what the format is of this, but it'll do a little bit of auto checking to make sure that this is formatted correctly and it has some correct values. It'll give you some errors if you do something wrong. But you can import it. Again, automatically pushes. So this one, you'll note, this is a lot of data, right? 186 lines of a bunch of ones and zeros. This takes a while to push when it gets large. So hopefully this is something that your guild, doesn't change too often, or you get configured and you send out. Because every time you change it, it's gonna push out to everybody, and it'll take some time to do that. But yeah, you push it whenever you need to, and make changes to it when you need to. So likewise, let's double check it. Likewise, we can init the main SK or tier SK list. So instead of using these buttons to click around, we could just seed this list however you want. So we do, for example, let's see, the tier SK init, same kind of interface. In this case, the schema is very simple. It's just a list of names. So we're doing the tier SK right. In this case, I've made this sample one, which is just closer to our actual SK list in our guild. Copy that column, and just paste it straight in here. Interesting, right? So this does some checking and makes sure that there are characters that every character you're trying to input is already in your guild data and vice versa, and it gives you some errors if it's not. So I'm just gonna go ahead and manually add those in here since it told me. So Presnick, and Gnarls Barkley. Here we go. So now it accepted that, and you notice it just reprioritized the list. It reordered the list to match that SK list. So that's a big time saver to get things initialized if you need to do that. Cool. So I think that is everything that a guild leader can do. Um, cool. So yeah, go ahead and watch the other videos if you need to see how the other stuff works. But that's basically it for the guild leader. Thanks. Bye.